Hi, my name's Dr. Vanessa Spiller. I'm a clinical psychologist, author of the book Explained by Brain, educator, as well as a parent of a young adult with FASD. Today's video is an exciting one because I am introducing a new resource that I've been working on that looks at the levels of functioning, and I'm going to combine that with one of my existing resources, which is the ability wheel. So I look forward to walking you through how you can use these two resources to better get services that respond appropriately to the needs of your young people, no matter where they are. When I'm talking about the levels of functioning, what I'm talking about is when you're supporting your young person with FASD, what is the level of support that they need? And it's my belief that misjudgment or a misunderstanding of where their level of functioning is at is probably one of the key reasons that we get behavioural symptoms for young people with FASD. But more about that soon. Most of you will be familiar with the ability wheel. This is a resource I put together quite a while ago now to help us map the abilities of our young people to be able to identify where their strengths and weaknesses are and in the different areas of brain-based functioning, and to be able to represent this on an image that you can share with teachers or support staff, anyone who's working with your young person. And you can see here that when we map this, if someone has a fairly even profile of abilities in all the different brain-related areas, then they're going to have quite a large wheel, and it is going to be fairly smooth. And we use this image as well as this information to help explain how people who have fairly even pattern of abilities and skills are able to roll through life, so to speak. So if you have a nice big wheel and it is rather smooth, your life is going to run quite smoothly in general. That's not to say that there won't be challenges, but in general, when you come across obstacles or when you have to go right up a hill on this metaphorical bike and this wheel that you have, then you're going to be able to do that without too much support, except in exceptional circumstances. If we look at the wheels of many young people with FASD, they don't look anything like that lovely, smooth, large wheel. So if we use this example here of this particular young person, you can see that they have impairment, and significant impairment, severe impairment in fact, in multiple areas of brain-based functioning. And what this does is it both reduces the size of the wheel that they're working with, but it also causes it to be misshapen. And this starts to cause them significant difficulties with their life. If we took that metaphorical wheel and turned it into an actual wheel and an actual bicycle, like this one here, what you can see is the other people who are riding with this young person, they're going to have a pretty smooth ride, and they're going to be able to get through life doing the things that they need to do with a little bit of effort and energy. But if you've got misshapen and small wheels, what that means is you're using up an enormous amount of energy in order just to travel a really small distance. And so if you were riding the bike of this young guy here, this little fella, what you would quickly discover is that after riding that bike for only a really short amount of time, you're both going to be really tired and exhausted because you're working really hard to make your bike go anywhere. And you're probably going to be really cranky and frustrated because it's just not doing the things you want it to do. So how can we use this map to help other people like teachers or support workers or people who are running sporting or educational groups for our young people to understand our kids better? Well, by putting both of those wheels on this resource, we're able to really easily see where their areas of missing skills and abilities are. And if we go a step further and we look at the gap between what a typically developing neurotypical young person, what they might be functioning and able to do, and what our young people with FASD actually have and the difficulties and the gaps that they have in their skills and abilities, you can see really clearly the areas in which they're going to need reasonable accommodations to compensate for these missing skills and abilities. And they're the areas that are shaded in this diagram here. We can see that the interventions and the supports that go into place really need to be focused on teaching those things that are in that shaded area, those missing skills and abilities. So what we know as parents and carers, as well as educators and people who are working with young people with FASD, is that these missing skills and abilities are going to be the most evident in settings that demand these skills the most. So the best example I can give of this is typically the playground. So the playground is an area where young people have an enormous amount of sensory input. There is a lot of people and young people walking around. There's a whole lot of fast moving action going on. There's a lot of problem solving that's required. There's a lot of social skills that are required. And typically this occurs in a setting where there's minimal supervision. The other thing that we know is that consequences and punishment do very little to assist a young person with FASD who has these kind of missing skills and abilities. And that's because consequences and punishments don't teach missing skills or abilities. They do very little to bring that pink line any closer to the green line. So what are the skills and abilities that young people with FASD and other young people need in order to be successful at school? Well, it turns out it's a really long list, and these are just a few. But these kind of skills range from things like friendship making skills, not only the ability to make friends, but then the skills required to keep friends, so a whole range of social skills. They need negotiating skills, the ability to calm themselves down, the ability to manage strong emotions like boredom, frustration, excitement, disappointment. They need to be able to reliably focus and maintain attention, not only in the classroom, but when they're outside with their peers. The ability to stop doing something that they enjoy, the ability to start doing something that they don't enjoy, the ability to move from one activity to another activity, the ability to follow instructions and to be able to understand those instructions, particularly if they have multiple steps in them. They need the ability to problem solve, again, not just with friendships, but also with the classwork that they're doing or little issues that come up day to day. The ability to screen out loud noises and avoid distractions, the ability to be quiet, the ability to ask for help, the ability to accept help, but they also need the capacity to be able to do inner self-talk and manage inner self-talk. But that's not all. They also need the ability to share, to be able to understand concepts such as ownership. They need to be able to understand multiple step instructions, particularly those that are spread over a larger period of time. They need the ability to listen to others, both their peers as well as their teachers and other school staff. They need the ability to play, and play not just one game, but multiple games. They need the ability to line up, to understand and keep track of time. They need the ability to tell when someone is joking or when someone is tricking them or pulling a gag on them. They need the ability to tell when something is metaphorical rather than literal. They need the ability to think abstractly. And then we also need those actual academic skills that schools are very focused on. They need the ability to read and write and count. And they need the capacity and the ability to integrate new information with old information. So as you can see, the list of skills that are needed to be successful in schools, even before we touch the academics, it's enormous. So how do we best get people like school teachers and school staff to understand what supports and accommodations that our young people with FASD actually need? So one way is by looking at and mapping our young people's skills. So if we look at the skills that are actually required to be successful in making friends, we know that there are skills that are required in things like adaptive functioning, in particular social skills, executive functioning, so the ability to stop and start ourselves and to manage our impulses, our affect and emotional regulation skills, the capacity to pay attention, some memory skills are required, as well as language skills and things like problem solving. So if we can map our own young people's abilities and impose them on the graph and show where the areas of deficit are, it becomes really clear where schools and other places that are trying to support our young people need to put their supports and accommodations. And that's in those areas with those pink lines through them, those shaded areas. And we can provide these maps for a whole range of skills and abilities that our young people might be missing. Things like the ability to ask for help, the skills needed to calm ourselves down, or even just the ability to play games with other young people. So as you can see, there is a lot of areas in which our young people require support and accommodations, particularly in the school setting, many of which don't get fully addressed. So if we know, and schools know, that our young people have missing skills and abilities in a range of areas that lead to behavioural symptoms if they're not addressed, how do we best support them? Well, this is where I've come up with the 5 levels of functioning and helping schools and parents and carers to understand the level of functioning that their young person is at and what that might mean in terms of necessary skills and supports and accommodations. The most basic level of functioning is the doing for level. And all of us start here, and all of us, well, many of us end here as well. And so at this level of functioning, people are unable to do even the most basic functions independently. They're completely reliant on other people for their survival and to get their basic needs met. And the best example of this is probably newborn babies, the very elderly, or those with really severe disabilities or illnesses. So people who fall into this range of functioning really require assistance with every aspect of their life. And if they don't get those supports, unfortunately, many of them will pass on. The next level of functioning is doing with. And so these are children and adults who are able to successfully do particular tasks or particular activities, provided that someone is doing it with them. So an example might be reading a book with a toddler or cleaning up a room with them. Or if you have someone with a disability, it may be that they're able to do their shopping, but only if they have a support worker who's also present to help them with certain components of the task. Individuals at this level can be successful with hands-on support, and that hands-on support is required to do usually the most difficult aspects of the task, but also to help the person stay on track with completing the activity. Again, unfortunately, without assistance and ongoing assistance, people who have this doing with level of functioning will often die prematurely or have an extremely low standard of living. For example, they may become homeless unless the appropriate supports and accommodations are put in place so that they have someone to do with in order to be successful in their life. The next level of functioning are called coaching. And these are individuals, both children and adults, who can be successful when there's other people around them to provide them with coaching or assistance or to guide them or encouragement. Now, this isn't the hands-on assistance that's needed at the level before, but it often requires things like verbal prompting and reminders to help them keep on track and to be able to execute the skills that they are trying to execute. Sometimes these individuals are able to do some skills without prompting, but they often need reminders for other aspects, or particularly if they're long and complicated tasks. And a really good example of coaching is exactly what you would see here, which is sports coaching. So many of the participants are able to do different aspects of the skills, but they need someone to kind of coordinate and keep them on track and to remind them of what the next steps might be. Again, if you're functioning at a coaching level and you're trying to live without assistance, you're likely to have a really low standard of living. For example, people who experience homelessness. This next level of functioning I call quasi-independence, and this is where most of us sit. These are people like you and me who are able to do most of the skills of modern day life with almost no assistance at all. We're able to do our own shopping and cooking, we can look after our house, we can look after our own health and hygiene, we can hold down a job, and we really only need assistance if we become injured or really unwell. And typically then, we only need that assistance until we've recovered. If we're faced with an unfamiliar situation, even if we don't quite know what to do, quite often we have the skills and abilities to go and seek out those people who do know what to do. So, for example, if a pipe busts in our house, we may not know how to fix that, but we often know enough to be able to go and turn off the water, to ring a plumber, and to get that assistance to us. So we have the skills to find a solution. The highest level of functioning is independence or true independence. And again, most of us actually don't reach this level of functioning. And this is if the luxuries of modern life, like electricity and manufactured foods and transportations and refrigeration, are somehow removed from our lives, we would still have the skills to be able to survive. So these are people like Bear Grylls and those who go on alone and are survivalists. So these are individuals that will still thrive if they're in a community where people can work together so that they're not having to do every single aspect of independent living. But in general, they can live and survive and even thrive, I guess, in situations that the rest of us wouldn't, because they have the skills in order to be almost completely self-sufficient, provided they don't become sick or injured. This is a level of functioning that many of us don't achieve. Maybe some of us don't even strive for. So what we know about for individuals with FASD is that their functioning and their level of functioning can vary across different domains, and these can be mapped using things like the ability wheel. We also know that they have splinter skills, so these are areas in which they're functioning at a much higher level than they are in the other areas of their life. We also know with FASD that functioning can vary across time and across different contexts. And we also know that the levels of functioning for lots of people with FASD is severely impacted by context. And these are things that affect all of us, but that particularly impact young people and adults with FASD. And they're things like strong emotions, stress, hunger, thirst, being really tired, or being unwell. The other thing that we know, and certainly that I've learned through clinical experience, is that because people with FASD have severe impairment in multiple areas of brain-based functioning, this has a really strong impact on their level of functioning overall. And many people with FASD, their level of functioning will often peak, even in adulthood, at the level of doing with or at the level of coaching. Now, this is not to say that they won't have any skills at all in quasi-independence, but often these skills are splinter skills. So there may be, a couple of things that they're able to do really very independently. But often when these are more complex and in the broader scope of things, these tend to be splinter skills, and that they're not able to function with quasi-independence in all the different areas of their life. And it's this mismatch between their levels of functioning and the expectations of others, like schools and society in general, that is a real source of distress for people with FASD. It can cause and bring them into conflict with all sorts of systems, but it also causes a profound amount of disability across their lifespan. What we know is that when we're able to get an accurate understanding of a person's level of functioning and provide them with the supports and accommodations that they need, then people with FASD can have the best chances of being successful in their life, in their education. So then we can take this a step further and we can have a good look at what are the age expected levels of functioning that apply in certain situations. So this example here is an example of a kindergarten classroom. So what we know is there's a number of skills and abilities that are required to be successful at the kindergarten level. And this might include the ability to manage strong feelings, particularly of frustration and boredom and excitement and disappointment. We also expect young people at this age to be able to stop doing something that they enjoy and have the ability to understand and follow some instructions. Now, the level of expected functioning for young people of this age is we don't expect them to be quasi-independent or independent. We will often expect them to be at the coaching level or at the doing with level. If we then have a look at our young person with FASD, we can often really easily map and track that in fact they're not at the coaching level. They're still at the doing for level or the doing with level. And what this means is that quite often they will need an individual education plan, or they'll need supports and accommodations written into their program, even at the kindergarten level or at the school level, that provide specific accommodations and adjustments that will allow them to be successful at the level of functioning that they actually are. And this process, it can be applied in every single setting that a person with FASD is in, from schools all the way across to the workplace, across to living their lives at home. So if you enjoyed today's talk, I would encourage you to share it or like it on whatever platform that you're watching it at. If you would like some more information, please go to jumpstartpsychology.com. You will find a whole range of both free and paid for resources available there. Probably my two most popular resources, though, would be my Explained by Brain workbook, which is a comprehensive workbook for parents, carers, and educators that talks all things FASD, covers all the brain domains, and has a whole range of resources and strategies included in it. The other resource that people really seem to enjoy is the Explained by Brain online parent training video series. There are 31 modules and around 17 hours worth of different videos that you can watch on all topics FASD. You could do it at your own pace. You can watch and rewatch it. And that's available also through my website. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with some more FASD resources soon.